I'm sorry I haven't done a video in the last 5 days. I was meant to do one on Friday night on the duopoly of Parliament, but with all the stories about George Pell on the ABC, I ended up doing a half-hour talk on redress. But as I'm new to all of this and all of the tech, and you're going to find this hilarious, I forgot to set a recording device. So I got a wonderful video, but I didn't have any sound. So what are you going to do about that? Um, so I'm back to doing one about the duopoly of Parliament, seeing the Australian Parliament open today. Over the weekend, I've had a wonderful weather event, and for a short while thought my house was going to flood, which was lovely and anxiety inducing, but more than that, it made me too tired to make a video. So that's the other reason that it's taken days for me to make one. Now, with the duopoly of Parliament, we have an election coming up, and I just want everyone to understand it doesn't matter whether you vote for Labor or whether you vote for Liberals. Parliament as a whole believe basically the same things. The arguments that they have are on minor things. The arguments they have are who's not the toughest on crime. Can't be seen to be the weakest on crime, so therefore we're ending up with all these crazy laws that in the future will be used against the people of Australia. But because they're playing these political games, the people writing the laws can't even see what their laws can be used for in the future. And if they can, then that says a lot more about them than it does about us as a society. But it's not just the duopoly of Parliament. Most of the people who sit in Parliament, whether it's a Liberal, Green, Independent, Teal, especially the Teals are just Liberals with a different colour. It's why they picked the colour teal. What happens when you mix blue and green together? You get teal. But we're not a party, we're just a group of independent people, highly paid for by all the same people. The same people who bank the Teals also bank the Liberals and the Labor Party. And their fundamental economic ideas, their fundamental ideas about how society works, their fundamental ideas about how people with money and privilege are better placed to make decisions about how society will work in the future are all the same. It doesn't matter what coat they wear in order to get their $250,000 a year. As I won't say that, that's derogatory, and there's no reason to enter into derogatory stuff about politicians to prove my point on the duopoly of Parliament. So I'm going to start with B.R.I.C.S. Before I was born, the British Empire started moving towards the common market, which we now call the EU. When Maggie Thatcher came to power, and I don't know when that was, I was a little tiny kid, Maggie Thatcher joined the EU without a referendum, which is why they had a referendum. And when Maggie Thatcher joined the EU, they decided to leave the Commonwealth. And just like Australia is with the United States today, we were heavily embedded with the Commonwealth. We bought Harrier jump jets, we bought submarines from Great Britain, and we bought most of our military stock from Great Britain. We allowed Great Britain to test nuclear arms in the middle of Australia, and we joined Five Eyes. Now we're in a very similar time to that in history where America is losing economic power around the world and other alliances are forming. And just like we did back then with Great Britain, we're making the same mistakes that we did with the United States of America, where we're tying ourselves to their gun belt blindly. And both Labor and Liberal fully agree with this, which is why we have AUKUS. It's why we're buying nuclear submarines, which the only thing I can get from the government on the nuclear submarines is they keep on adding the line conventionally powered armed submarines. These submarines are designed to sit off the coast of countries with 27 thermal nuclear warheads sitting inside those submarines, and they only have one military purpose: to threaten other countries with nuclear annihilation. They don't carry any other weapons. They have no self defense. The concept is they can sit on the bottom of the ocean for minimum 6 months' time. They can sit on the bottom of the ocean for 2 years if you want to get down to the nitty gritty. But their only task is to fire nuclear weapons. So why is it that Labor and Liberal are both happy to spend $50 billion on buying nuclear submarines that we don't know we're going to get? Because that's the other thing about all these contracts. If America or Britain decide that it's against their interests or that they need the nuclear submarines that they are building for us, the word they is very, very important. We're giving up our military sovereignty with the AUKUS agreement. It's a very scary agreement at a time when B.R.I.C.S, which is just an economic alliance, is not a military alliance, is forming, and at a time when the United States have decided the way they're going to deal with B.R.I.C.S is through military force. We're tying ourselves to America. Yet the people of Australia don't get to have a conversation. Everybody in Parliament is in agreement that this is what we need to do. The money that AUKUS is costing us could solve poverty. We could have everyone in this country out of poverty tomorrow. We could solve the housing crisis within 12 months with that sort of money. People don't need to be poor in this country, but both parties think that that's necessary in order for economic success of everybody else. It's sort of that horrible greater good argument. My children have to live in intergenerational poverty so that your children can be not even better off than you, because that doesn't happen anymore. If you're very, very lucky, your children might be at the same level as you. They both agree with that. They both agree that people who don't have work need to be punished by the government for the money that they get. They both believe fundamentally that if you receive a benefit from the government, that's unemployment benefit, disability support pension, even the age pay pension now, which is, it's so sad, the place where we've come to, where Parliament is so far removed from the people of this country that they can actually contemplate giving subsidies to American mining companies over making sure that their own people are not homeless. But both sides agree with that concept. That's important to do that. It's important to prop up American industry. It's important to prop up the American military complex and the German military complex, which is what we're doing. We're not building submarines in Australia. We're inviting other people who build submarines in Australia to come here and build them. And it's all a big, giant lie. The military-industrial complex is not the path to having employment success in this country. It's not going to bring that. But that's how they sell it to us. But they don't have to sell it to us, and that's the big issue. 90% of all legislation passed in Parliament is passed by both major parties. They agree on 90% of everything, and the other 10% is just like WWF wrestling. So we've gone on the BRICS, and we're not going to get a conversation about that. I've talked about nuclear submarines. We're not going to have a public conversation about that. We're not allowed to have a public conversation about that because the other people who are in full agreement with the direction this country is going in, and Labor and Liberal are not going to give you a change in that direction because fundamentally they believe the same things. I know I keep on saying that, but they're only arguing about little things. Who's going to be the biggest punisher of the person who spray paints Jew on the wall? This is one of the arguments we're having. That argument's going to lead to graffiti being deemed an act of terrorism. And what happens when somebody types, the Prime Minister of Australia should go to The Hague for war crimes? Does that become an act of terrorism? Well, the thing is, both parties agree that it should be, and by the end of this week, chances are putting graffiti on a wall is going to be an act of terrorism. So, yeah, that one's a thing. Now with Ukraine, how much money did this country give to Ukraine? Did the people of Australia get to have a say in that matter? Did the people of Australia get to say we don't want to spend this money in Ukraine? We didn't even get to voice that. The media, both sides of government, have been fully in sway with America when it comes to sanctioning Russia, when it comes to supporting Ukraine with arms. Here's something that our media should have done but never did, and this is how you know that it doesn't matter whether it's Labor or whether it's Liberal, the media's going to hide the important things. How did our Bushmasters go in Ukraine? How many Ukrainian men were sent to their deaths in dysfunctional vehicles that don't work in a theatre of war? Those things hold 12 people in the back of each single one of them, and every single one of them lasted less than 5 hours on the battlefield. If I'm wrong about that, then somebody in the government come and tell me where I'm wrong. But what I really want to know is why the media never bring that up. Why is it that both sides of Parliament seem to think it's okay to buy dodgy weapons of war that don't work when our soldiers actually need those dodgy weapons of war? I'm a total pacifist who's totally against war in every possible way, but I still don't like the concept of our soldiers having shitty weapons that don't work. And one thing Ukraine became was a testing ground for all our weapons of war that we don't get to use because we've only ever used them against people basically with pea shooters. Oh, gee, we took over Iraq. We did really good in Afghanistan, apart from the war crimes. But, surely at some point somebody went, these weapons are shit. They're going to kill our soldiers in a real war. Has our army become so incompetent that they can't tell the government that they're buying crap? Or has our army and the people in charge of our army become so complicit with the military-industrial complex that they refuse to tell our politicians when what the politicians are buying are crap and are going to kill the rank-and-file soldiers in this country? Yes, I'm a pacifist. I'm totally against war. But I don't like to think of some 19-year-old kid being sent to war with shit that's going to kill him. And that's exactly what the Bushmasters will do. But both sides of government are fully agreement that we should waste our money on this crap. If we're going to buy crap, then we should make sure that it works. We should make sure the shit that we buy does what it says on the box. But one of the things that Labor did while they were in office, They've commissioned They've commissioned remote control warships that don't need people to operate them because nobody wants to join the armed forces that don't exist, aren't even on paper. All they are is a tiny little concept on a few sheets of paper. But we're going to invest billions and billions in dollars in designing and getting this thing made. But we're not doing it here. What we're actually doing is paying a dodgy company in the American military industrial complex to build this concept that they have. The F-35 that Donald Trump said, and then this is why I mentioned the Harrier jump jets. Both parties have fully supported over the last 20 years the design and development of the F-35, even when experts were telling them when it was just a concept on a sheet of paper that it was a dud. Nothing but a dud. Don't waste your money on it. Don't buy it. You'd be better off designing your own warplane and making your own, is what the experts said about the F-35s. Now we have Donald Trump in power saying that he's ending the F-35 program. We've just bought 35 of these things. Might be more than that. Right? It might be closer to 50 of these things. How are we going to get parts? It's just like the Harrier jump jet. We're not going to have any parts. We're not going to be able to fly these things, and we're stuck with over $100 billion worth of planes that are shit. Thank you, America. We really did really good sticking to them, but as I say, both parties in agreement with that. Social services, both parties are fully in agreement with it. People who are poor deserve to be poor. They're lazy, and we're going to give them parole without court called mutual obligations, and we're going to pay them such a low level that it makes sure that there's always a rising rate of mental illness. There's always a rising rate of domestic violence. We always have a youth crime problem, and we always have a rising crime problem. We always have a housing problem, and we always have a homelessness problem, because by paying people such poverty rates, and that's what Social Security is, you ensure that all those problems keep on rising. My question is, government knows all these things, Parliament knows all these things, so why does Parliament have big arguments about who's going to be the nastiest to Australia's poor people? Like, do you really believe that society likes the fact that we have poor people? Like, that's going to bite you all on the arse one day, because one day it's going to be the kids of the middle class that are ending up on poverty street, and then all the people in the middle class are going to abandon politics. And I don't know what that means for this country, but the whole thing's scary, and I just really wish that common people would get more into politics. And one of the things I believe that would make it so that we have more common people enter politics and move into politics is to drop the money that a politician makes, like their base wage, down to the average male earnings. So that's about $80,000, $70,000 a year. So if politicians were paid about $70,000 a year, these goons that want $250,000 a year, these goons that say that poor people can't be lifted up above the poverty line, while they kick back on $250,000 a year plus expenses, like, how dare they sit there and say we have to follow America down their military suicide and have homeless people in this street? And they both agree with this. Doesn't matter who you vote for, this is what we're getting. We're following America down this horrible path. We've been through it before with Britain, and yeah, So during the election this year, just remember that it's all a fake WWF wrestling match. I'd like to apologise for the sounds of nature outside. But yeah, I hope everyone's safe in the floods. I hope everyone's safe in the bushfires. And just remember, if you're entitled to redress, chances are you'd win a civil case. Speak to a decent lawyer. Start with Arnold Thomas and Becker. Thank you.